Hey everybody, it's Matthew. Welcome back to the channel. I was looking around through guitar news recently and I stumbled across an article from Ultimate Guitar that I thought would be interesting to talk about. And it's an interesting thing talking about the boutique guitar and bass bubble and whether or not it burst recently. But this will be an interesting discussion of boutique gear and how economics applies to the guitar gear market. So let's take a look at what's going on here on this article from Ultimate Guitar. 2024 has brought some swift changes to the guitar gear market as used prices have plummeted and inventory has increased significantly. We've already seen a burst of the boutique pedal market as smaller companies closed up shop, reduced activity, and prices came down on the used market dramatically as well. It all brings into question whether the same burst has happened or is about to happen for the high end of the guitar and bass market as well. You're probably asking yourself, why does this matter? Well, of course it matters. We're talking about spending real money. It matters for a few reasons, as there are several smaller independent builders who may see their business decline or peter out altogether. Likewise, for bargain hunters, this may be a prime time to scoop up a deal on the used or second-hand market, or potentially from smaller builders directly who need to move stock. Moreover, it's a good way to check the pulse of the current guitar landscape right before the holiday buying season. So they reference the recent boutique pedal market, which the pedal market has been strange and competitive lately. We're seeing the rise of old secondhand gear on pedals get really big, mostly because of people in the pedal market talking about these older pedals and sort of bringing the awareness to them, and then they get more popular than this new boutique stuff. Although the boutique pedals have really been pushing their prices up, and it gets really tough to justify that. Big reason why I would never consider like a Strymon pedal, because they're just so expensive and they do so many things that I don't necessarily need. So it's like, why would I spend that kind of money? But anyway, let's keep going to what this is really about when it comes to guitar. What does it mean to burst a bubble? I'm not going to dive into the economic jargon, though I'm sure some economists will surely pop into the comment section and let us all know how wrong I am. But the burst essentially means a sudden downspin in valuation, sales, and market growth. Think of the pandemic in 2020 and how it inflated prices and demand for gear outpaced production. There was a rapid inflation in the value of goods above normal levels and nearly equally rapid deflation in the value back to normal levels. So let's break down bubbles here. So he's not entirely wrong with what he's saying here. A bubble is the rapid increase in valuation or the rapid overvaluation of a particular thing. And then when that valuation starts to drop, it does so very dramatically. And then everyone ejects from the market. And then you're basically left with a shell that has literally nothing, next to no value left in it. Which is what happened with the market back in 2007 in the US. Stocks and particularly real estate values were getting overinflated, overspeculated. Everything was getting really hot. And then when an economic downturn finally hit and these loans and real estate stuff got defaulted on, everything fell apart. The value completely disappeared overnight. Everyone ran away from the market screaming, and it put a lot of businesses in trouble and put a lot of people out of business because everything just fell apart so quickly. But how does this apply to the guitar market? Let me read this next part and then we'll talk about that real quick. This led to a temporary boon to many businesses, both gear builders as well as gear vendors and retailers. Used gear sales plummeted. The dip in production from factory shutdowns and part shortages, breathing constant life into the market. Many smaller builders were selling gear as fast as they could build it. Now that has halted and demand has diminished, and many builders are left with slower sales and consumers who won't rush to pay premium prices. That is the bubble bursting, which in guitar marketplaces is not nearly as dramatic as when the housing bubble burst in 2008, which we just talked about. So again, it's key to remember the consequences aren't as dire. So let's talk about what happened during the pandemic. Let's talk about before. Now, in my theory, I would guess that the boutique market has probably been on a steady decline prior to that anyway. Probably quite steady because boutique gear was, still fairly popular. There wasn't really anything disrupting that. but it's more like the development of other guitar builders and the rest of the market being able to increase their quality over time while also keeping their costs reduced. Like, a lot of good guitars for less money started popping up all the time, and so the need for a boutique guitar would start declining because less people are interested in a boutique guitar when you can buy a quality instrument for a lot less money. Now, what happened with the pandemic was you saw a sudden increase in the demand for guitars because a lot of people, having nothing to do, decided to try to do it. And that includes people that also had money to spend on the boutique guitars. But when your demand gets really hot, people are willing to spend more money on the thing because of how bad they want it. So you can keep your prices higher, or people will be more willing to pay a higher price for the same thing. And like we saw, the guitar market got a huge jump in the middle of the pandemic because of how interested people got in it, because it was something to do. Now, see, what happens in that situation, it's not necessarily that things were rapidly getting overvalued and the value was getting pushed up. But what happened was when inflation hit and started increasing costs across the board for businesses and consumers alike, the businesses had to keep raising the prices to keep up with that value. But the problem is inflation affected everybody. So when your money becomes less valuable and the economy gets tighter, people are less willing to spend their money. So the demand for a high-end boutique product is going to fall dramatically when people need to save money. And if somebody really wants a guitar at that point, they're not going to buy a boutique instrument for that because it's just not economically smart for them to do that when all they want is a guitar to play, especially with, like I said, there's really great gear out there that doesn't cost a lot of money. So when that happens, guitar builders are left with a choice. Keep the prices high and watch your sales dry up really slowly, or bring them down to keep your sales going. But then, of course, you risk you're making less money from each sale and potentially losing money because you have to sell those at cost because the demand for them has disappeared. Now, with how guitar works, of course, our economy stabilized a little bit now, so this isn't as big of an issue. So now the demand will probably start trickling back, and there's always that back end demand from, seasoned guitar players or people who like guitar that have a lot of money that are still going to be there to buy the instruments. Even when the demand changes, there will still be some people they're buying. So it's not, completely falling apart. But it's like, again, why would I pay the boutique prices for an instrument in a tight economy when I can get a really good new instrument that's less expensive, maybe has less, high-end features, but it's going to still play well and I can get a good deal on it, or going to the secondhand market and looking for boutique stuff there that you can maybe get at a lower price. So that's kind of what is going on here, is you had a boutique guitars with trickling demand, maybe slightly falling, over the years. Prior to the pandemic, you saw a sudden increase in demand for guitars, which floods the guitar market with a bunch of new people who have never bought a guitar before. And some of those people probably have a decent amount of money. They can buy the boutique stuff and everybody does well. A lot of people like to try to support smaller businesses just because, they don't have the economies of scale and the numbers and things. They don't have the awareness. So it does them a lot of good for you to buy a guitar from them. People might be more willing to do that. But then the economy starts rapidly getting bad because inflation is finally hitting from everything that happened during COVID. Then all of that disappears. These builders are left with a bunch of stuff they can't sell, so they have to bring their prices back down again, even though the high inflation economy, that could be really bad. And things will probably get back to a more normal level pretty soon. But again, what does it mean for guitarists? They say here, quite frankly, it means a return to a more normal market, or at least a market many of us considered normal prior to 2020. So there's your thing. You had that little spike there in the few years of the pandemic, and then we're going to go back to normal levels. So it's kind of like you get this big bell in the middle, and then everything kind of goes on as normal. There's plenty of guitar stock, both used and new, available, which limits competition and leads to smaller vendors having to offer gear as low a price as possible. Even accounting for inflation, the price gouging of the pandemic has come and gone. So if you want to buy a new guitar, now is certainly not a bad time, especially if you want to support local businesses and local builders who might be hurting. However, do not believe the bubble has completely burst. It's close, but the demand is still there to keep many luthiers and smaller brands in business. In fact, there's been a swell of new import brands joining the scene. So as much as the guitar pedal bubble has burst, I'm reluctant to say the same for the guitar and bass market. I mean, that's the thing. At this point with where guitars and guitar manufacturing is, if you buy a boutique instrument, you're more than likely just doing it because you want to support that business, and maybe you want to have an instrument that's a little unique, a little interesting, because if it's boutique, it's more likely to be painstakingly built. More things have been touched by hands and built by hand, and the novelty of that can be a pretty cool thing. And of course, that being said, today with where guitar manufacturing is, it's very easy for companies to make high quality instruments at a low cost because of the technology of CNC and other mass production methods that have been perfected for the guitar that make it much easier to make a less expensive product. And that's what people are going to end up looking for if they're just trying to get a guitar that works and isn't going to ruin their budget or anything like that. They're going to be going for cheaper, consistently mass-produced guitars. And this is why now you're also, the global economy, you're also seeing a more international market come in, because in some of these international areas, they're making guitars cheaper than, say, boutique companies in the US or UK or places like that. So they come in on the back end of that market, places from like Mexico and China and other countries in Europe, South America, you know, all these different places. India as well, getting in on the market. These are builders that would have quality issues that would make it really hard for them to make a cheaper instrument and send it out internationally. So they would be typically limited to their local markets and not able to produce at a consistent high enough quality to justify exporting instruments. But now that technology has caught up a lot more, they're actually making pretty high-end products now. And that's not anything new for China. I know people with cheap guitars in China. That's been a thing in China, is these big manufacturers trying to make products as cheaply as possible and then send them out overseas because, you know, if it's real cheap, then it makes it a lot easier to sell it internationally, right? Because there's costs you got to consider. And so they've been flooding the market. But the domestic stuff, though, has been at a pretty high quality for quite some time. There are actually a lot of Chinese guitar manufacturers that don't even sell internationally at all, and they make high quality gear that you may have never seen. But now, because they can keep their costs down, these companies are now more likely to start exporting instruments as well, so you can get actual high-end exported instruments that are cheaper because they're coming from a different country that doesn't have a weight in its history of manufacturing quality like the USA does, where they can actually charge more money for what they're doing. But it's also a country where the standard of living is higher, so it's more expensive to manufacture things there. It's not that way in places like China and India. And that's really the struggle that boutique builders are going to continue to have, is the quality gap keeps shrinking and shrinking, especially with these international builders who can start sending out their products globally now because it's cheaper and easier for them to make guitars than it's ever been. And even, you know, the big companies continuing to improve their quality with the mass production techniques and things like that. The boutique builders are gonna struggle, and at some point they will probably either disappear or be, you know, so niche that a lot of the people buying this stuff may not even be musicians anymore. They may just be people that have made a lot of money doing other things, and they just are interested in the novelty of the guitar. I hope that doesn't happen, because, you know, boutique builders are really cool. They're really interesting. You can find some really cool guitars you've never seen before, but got to be wary of that global market. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this article. I think that was a really interesting discussion we got into there, bringing up all kinds of things with economics, global manufacturing, and all those different things coalescing in this story. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like and subscribe if you did, of course. Don't forget to leave a comment down below if you'd like. And as always, don't forget to click the bell so you get a notification when a new video is out. And I'll see you guys next time in another video. Have a good one.